This video is brought to you by Miniature Market. Thousands of board games, miniatures, and paints, discount prices at miniaturemarket.com.
Hey guys, Mike here, and going into GenCon50, I had done my top 10 games I was looking forward to coming out of GenCon, and my number one game this year coming out that I was looking forward to was The Expanse. Now I don't know how many of you have watched on the Syfy channel here in the US, but The Expanse is a really great sci-fi show. It comes out on the Syfy channel. It's on their second season they got done with, and it is a great series. But The Expanse was kind of, the hype around The Expanse beforehand was that it kind of had a resemblance to Twilight Struggle, which I thought was really cool. I really like Twilight Struggle, and it was a 2 to 4 player game. So I thought that was really neat. So this really perked my interest. It was made by WizKids. So what I'm going to do, I've played it now a couple times. I've got some footage of us playing it. So I'm going to take down the table, kind of show you some examples, and kind of walk you through how the gameplay is done. And then it'll come back up top, and I'll give you what my final thoughts were. And I hope that The Expanse lives up to the hype as my number one game coming out of GenCon 50. Okay, The Expanse is a territory control game where the object is we're trying to exert influence in the different bases so that when we score, the more influence that you have in a different sector or different base, the more points you can score. So you've got the bases, and they're broken up into 4 different areas. They've got the inner planets, the belt, and then the outer planets, which is actually divided up into 2 bands. You've got Saturn in one, and you've got Jupiter in the other one. And you can move your ships between the bands, and then once you have a ship in the orbital, you can then deploy influence into whatever base. But yet some of the inner planets, like around Earth, that orbital actually has 3 bases. So on your turn, you can select any one of the 5 cards on the side of the board, but they have a cost. For normal players, it's the first one you can get on the top of the board is a 0 cost. The next 2 cost 1, and then the bottom 2 cost 2, and those are control points. But they're also the points that are going to be used at the end of the game to determine who's the winner. So if you spend those points to buy cards, you can't take away from it at end scoring. So when you select the card, you can do 2 things with it. One of 2 things. You can either use it for the action points in the top corner of the card. If you do that, you can then get actions, and you can take actions. I'll talk about actions in a minute. However, if you do that, on the card, each card has a number of symbols that denote the 4 different factions that are in play in the game. If you use the card for actions, the card is then presented in initiative order to the other players to be able to use the event that's on the card as a free event. If nobody uses it, then it just goes away. But you can't use the event and the actions. You can only do one or the other. Now, the opponents, if they don't want to use the action immediately, they can actually spend 1 command point, and they can save the event. So they could use it at a later point, specifically right around scoring, which when we talk about the scoring, that will come back into play. If one of the other players decide to do that, they get bumped down in the initiative order, and the initiative order is recycled. In a 2-player game, you don't use the initiative track, you just play back and forth. So some of the examples that you see here, we played a 2-player game, you don't use the initiative track. So you don't need to worry about shuffling initiatives if one takes the card. After that, all of the cards slide up, a new card is put down, and it goes to the other player. Actions. So if I don't use the card as an event, and I chose to use it as actions, I can do one of 4 things. I can move a fleet, and then I can move a fleet to any orbital in my band or 1 band away. I can deploy influence. I can deploy influence to any one of the bases that I have a ship in the orbital. I can build a new ship if I wanted, or a lot of times you've got technologies or that allow you to use action points. All right, when a player selects a scoring card, and you can see over there there's scoring cards available, they pick it up just like normal, but it's not a normal turn, it's a scoring turn. When you get to a scoring turn, the first thing that happens is the player who chose the scoring card selects a secret sector. That's a sector that's going to get bonus points when scoring is done, and not just the normal points. After that occurs, the player to the left of the person who drew the scoring card then may play an event that they have stored. So back when I said you can store an event, if you don't want to use it, you could spend a command point to store that event. Well, now you can actually play that event. Once that is done, you then will start to add up the points. You get, again, it's very similar to other area control. Whoever has the most cubes in a base, they score the point. If it's a tie, under normal circumstances, no one gets it. If you also control the orbital as well, you get an extra bonus point. So, but like in Mars, for example, down there you can see the players got one on one station, one on another station, and then the orbital. So they get 2 points for each of the bases, and then an extra bonus point for the orbital. So that would score 3. Now the bonus sector, they have their own bonus type scoring, and as you go through the game, those bonuses get greater. After all of your scoring has been totaled up, you move your command point token around the board. The player with the lowest command points takes control of the Rocinante. Every player is allowed to build 1 fleet, and in the first, second, and third scoring rounds, you get a technology. So this is played through until the last scoring card comes up, and then the last scoring card is taken and executed. Once that has happened, you do a scoring round just like normal, and the player with the most points at the end of the game is the winner. So let's go back up top, and I will give you my final thoughts on The Expanse. So there you go. That is The Expanse. And you know what? I think it does live up to the hype. I really enjoyed this game. I thought that this game was really fun. I thought that the game was... you can definitely feel the Twilight Struggle in the game with the, with the moving around and gaining the influence and stuff. So I really could get that vibe from it. I've only played it as a 2-player game, and I think that when you go from a 2-player to a 4-player game, I bet that game changes drastically. Where in the 2-player game, you don't use the initiative, and you also, there's a couple of the bases that aren't there, and then some of the scoring is just a touch different. But what I would look forward to in the bigger game is how whenever you don't use that, when you pull your card and you don't use it for the event, you've really got to think, man, this is going to go through 3 people here or 2 people, maybe one of them pick it up. And so you have to kind of, in your mind, you have to know what strategy not only you're doing, but you have to start looking at the other players and saying, I wonder what strategy they're employing. Because while this card, you look at the card like, oh, this isn't going to help me. I'd love to use it for the action points. That's great. But if this plays into the strategy one of your opponents is doing, you can't go and use that card because you give your opponent too much of an advantage, and that's really cool. This is a really thinky game. The components on it are really cool. It's got all of the pictures and the cards are from the TV show, which I know some people may or may not like that. I think it looks neat. I think whenever you pull one of the cards, you go, oh, I remember who that is. So you get that little bit of a feel to it. It's made by WizKids. I think the production value, again, is really good on it. All of the ships and fleets are represented by cardboard tokens, and then all of the influence are little wooden cubes. So it looks appealing. It's a really easy game to get into. When I sat down with it for the first time, I looked at it, we put it on the table, we kind of had an idea, and as soon as we went through our first scoring round, immediately we knew what we were doing, and immediately we knew how our strategy needed to tweak. And this was one of the very few games that after the first couple turns, I said, wait a minute, I want to know in detail what your power is, and how your faction works, because they were making moves that were so different than what I was trying to do. And then I found out, oh, the UN's faction, they're really powerful with influence on the ground, and that's why you're not moving your ships around. Well, I was playing Mars, my civilization, my player powers had a lot to do with ship and ship combat and things. So it's like we played very differently, trying to maneuver around very different ways. So it's really cool. So it's got that great where you kind of have your tunnel vision as to what you're doing, but if you don't have that bigger view of what the other player or players are doing in the game, you're going to find yourself getting behind really quickly. I didn't touch on it too much in the overview, but there's the Rocinante card, which is cool, and it's almost like a catch-up mechanic because the player who's the lowest after each scoring round, they get the Rocinante card, and that card actually has 6 actions that can be done during the pre-event phase of a scoring round. So, and it can kind of swing things, and you also get to use the Rocinante as one of your own ships. So when I was playing Mars, it was great to have another ship to move around the board to be able to drop off influence. So that was really neat. So that Rocinante catch-up mechanic is really cool. And it's also very thematic where it hops from faction to faction, helping them out. I thought that worked out well too. I definitely could feel the theme on this game. You definitely felt like there were times when I was completely neglecting the belt because you know what, they weren't important. So I in my whole mind, I kept reminding, oh, Earth doesn't care, or Mars doesn't care about the belt. And there were times like, you're right, I don't. The belt's not going to help me. I need to care about Saturn. I need to care about Jupiter. They're more in play than the belt at sometimes, or sometimes vice versa. So you really could get that feel. That always would kind of go through my head every time I was playing. So I think that the theme really comes through in this game. I think this game's got a great amount of replayability, and I also think it's a great game to get people into an area control type game where there's not a lot of rules. The rules are very well written. It's a very straightforward game. Setup is real fast. Not a big game. So I definitely think fans of the show and fans of things like Twilight Struggle, the area control aspect of Twilight Struggle, are all going to really enjoy playing this game. I know that this came out of Gen Con at a very limited release, but from what I understand is this is going to be out in wide release, I believe, in October. If you happen to be going to Essen, I believe they're going to have them on sale at Essen at the WizKids booth. What I did find out is that I know that at Gen Con these sold out extremely rapidly. So if you're interested in the Expanse, I would highly recommend you guys going by the WizKids booth if you happen to be able to go to Essen and picking up a copy of the Expanse. I hope to be able to play some 3- and 4-player games to be able to experience what that's like. So if I do, if it's a major difference or anything like that than what I think, maybe I'll come back and we'll do it, or maybe we'll do it live one time to show what the Expanse is like with more than 2 players. But even if you can play it as 2, it is an absolutely great game, and I am so happy that I got a chance to play this, and it definitely lived up to my #1 game of Gen Con. That is the Expanse. All right, guys, thanks for watching.